a number of things were restated. In fact, you could summarize the whole fifth report as more of the same with greater certainty. What is more of the same? Warming of the climate system is unequivocal, and since the 1950s, many of the observed changes are unprecedented over decades to millennia. Excuse me. In the Northern Hemisphere, 1983 to 2012 was likely the warmest 30-year period of the last 1,400 years. Ocean warming dominates the increase in energy stored in the climate system, accounting for more than 90% of the energy accumulated between 71 and 2010. I mean, this is important. You would expect, if there's an imbalance of energy input versus output at the top of the atmosphere, the energy has to go somewhere. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's just transferred from one form to another. And here it's being transferred in terms of heating of the ocean, which is warmed, and 90% of it is there. The atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide have increased to levels unprecedented in the last 800,000 years. And it's extremely likely that human influence has been the dominant cause of observed warming since the mid-20th century. More of the same, greater certainty, with one slight addition here. Most aspects of the climate system will persist for many centuries. Sorry, most aspects of climate change, thank you very much, will persist for many centuries, even if emissions of CO2 are stopped. This represents a substantial multi-century climate change commitment created by past, present, and future emissions. This is saying that the longevity of the change that we have in store is great. And the analogy can go with a pot of water on a stove is quite direct. If you put a pot of water on the stove and you turn up the element to heat it up, it takes time for the pot to heat up, the water to heat up. And if you suddenly go, oh no, it's too hot, let's turn down the element, well, it doesn't cool right away. That's because most of the heat's in the ocean, and the ocean has a high heat capacity. It takes 5 times as much energy to raise 1 gram of sand by 1 degree relative to the ocean. And so the ocean retains the heat for a long time as well. So the science, as I'll try to argue, is relatively well known, it's been well known for quite some time, but of course the conveyance of that science to the public has some issues, and so there's still confusion within the general public as to the validity or the strength of the science. And I'll start with a number of ways of illustrating how that has occurred. Well, of course, most of us get our science through the media, and the media, of course, are in the business of, by and large, not going broke, but making money, and in doing so, they'll need to have catchy headlines that will draw you into the paper or magazine so that you can read the article and see the advertisements. And hopefully with large circulations, you can pay more for those advertisements. So there's a tendency in the media to sensationalize, and this is beautifully illustrated here in a tabloid. I mean, I realize it's a tabloid, but it's a great example. The Sun, which says, summer heat waves will melt polar ice caps and result in oceans rising 150 feet. You know, shocking map inside, shows where various cities are underwater. In Vancouver here, it's one of your sessions later on about sea level in Vancouver. Vancouver's underwater in this particular map in here. But so I mean, clearly there's a tendency to sensationalize. But another problem with the media is that very often the people writing the stories, the science stories, have little, if any, scientific training. So very often you see little inaccuracies starting to permeate their way through the media, and then they propagate through the general public because of an inability to actually